Creating these classes requires equipment and services that cost money. If you appreciate this education, please think about going to elithecomputerguy.com and offering a one-time or monthly recurring donation. Welcome back. As you know, I am Eli the Computer Guy, and in today's class, I am going to be showing you how to connect your PHP code to your MySQL database. So all we are going to be doing today is connecting PHP to MySQL, seeing if it works or seeing what error code we get. That is it. We are not going to be doing selects. We are not going to be doing inserts, and we sure as crap are not going to be doing updates. All we're going to be doing is connecting. So with what we're going to be doing today, we are going to be using something called the MySQLi Extension. So this is actually built into PHP. Because again, remember, I try to teach you folks as little as possible. So I'm not going to teach you something where you have to install an additional extension. There are other ways to connect your PHP code to your MySQL database, but that would involve you installing additional extensions into PHP, which becomes more complicated, more tedious, and frankly, MySQLi works great for most of the tasks that you're going to be needing. So that is what we're going to be doing today. Now in our environment, we're going to be using the MySQL lab environment that we created for the other MySQL classes. So I have Ubuntu 18.04. I have it installed into a virtual instance within VirtualBox on my MacBook Pro. I then used something called tasksel to install the full LAMP stack. So we have Apache, MySQL, and PHP installed onto that virtual machine that I created. And of course, I have the MySQL database that I created for the previous classes. So that is the lab environment that we're going to be dealing with. And so with that lab environment, we're going to start writing some PHP code that will be connecting using the MySQLi extension in order to connect over to your MySQL database that you should have created. And that is what I'm going to show you how to do today. So warning, Will Robinson, warning. The big warning that I will give you with the class today is that this is not a beginner level class. At this point, you need to know a number of different types of technology. You need to have a basic understanding of how Linux servers work. We're going to have to actually create a directory today and change ownership of the directory. So you need to know how to do that in the Linux world. You need a basic understanding of how Apache works. Now let me be clear, basic. Just kind of sort of need to know that it does work, but you do need to know that, and you need to troubleshoot if things don't work how they're supposed to work. And finally, you have to have a basic understanding, obviously, of MySQL at this point, because we're connecting to a MySQL database on a Linux server, and so you need a basic understanding of MySQL. Now, what I have set up today, again, for the lab environment, I'm trying to make this as simple as possible so you can hyper-focus on what you're trying to learn. So with our lab environment, again, everything is on one machine. You are going to be connecting to the local host. Now, why I am doing this way for when you're writing PHP code is so that you don't run into weird permissions or sharing or networking issues. So if you have a MySQL database over on a different server and you're using PHP code to connect to that other server, you might run into some issues, right? Ports may be blocked. Permissions may be not how you think they are, right? So when you write the code, you may start getting errors, not because you wrote the code improperly, but maybe the permissions within the MySQL database server aren't what you think they are. Or maybe firewall permissions aren't what you think they are. So you can run into issues that way. So one of the reasons why we're doing the lab environment the way that we are is that we have one machine. So basically the PHP code on a Linux server is connecting to the MySQL database server on the exact same server. So we don't run into firewall issues. We don't run into weird permission issues. We don't run into any of those other kinds of problems. The other warning that I will give you is for the code. I will be writing the code today using something called gEdit. So this is the basic text editor in the Linux world. Now, a lot of old timers who for some reason watch my videos. I don't know. If you already know the subject, why are you watching the videos? Anyways, a lot of the old timers out there give me a lot of crap because when I write basic PHP code, when I write basic scripting code for these types of classes, I generally use the lowest, the crappiest text editor I can find. So TextEdit on a Mac, a Notepad, on the Windows world and gEdit in the Linux world. The reason that I do that is so that people do not get confused, especially new people do not get confused about what is required in order to write things like PHP code. All you need to write PHP code is a text editor. The crappiest, most worthless, most garbage text editor out there. As long as you can spit out text and you can change the extension to .php, that's all you need. But one of the problems a lot of new people get into is when they're going to write PHP code, they're learning PHP code and they're watching somebody use some higher level, what is called an IDE. And so then they start getting confused about what is the code and what is the IDE, and it gets very frustrating for them, and so they end up giving up. So one of the things that I like to do is, especially when I'm showing you very simple things, I will show you the simplest text editor that I can use, because again, I want you to understand that's all you need in order to write code. What the IDE provides, or what these higher level programming environments provide to you, make life easier, but you don't actually have to do it that way. I think about it like with writing a term paper. Like imagine that you're writing, that you have to write, right? So you can write using a text editor, right? So if you need to write like a paragraph, writing that in a text editor will just be fine. You write it out in a text editor, you hit print or whatever else, email it, and that's fine. The reason that you use something like Word, or the reason that you use some kind of other word processing software, is because when you're writing a 20-page paper or a 100-page paper, having spell check is nice. Having grammar check is nice. Being able to easily bounce through the document is nice. It's not actually required though. You could write a whole dissertation using a text editor. Just honestly, once you get past a couple of paragraphs, then it just becomes a pain in the butt. So what I'm trying to teach you, I'm just simply trying to teach you how to type, how to write some of these things out. So for the smaller chunks of code that I'm showing you, I am showing you with a text editor. Again, when we get to more complicated things, then I will use a higher level environment. So I just want you to kind of understand that when you're seeing me write out this code in a text editor, I'm just showing you, again, if you're just knocking out 10 lines of code or 20 lines of code, you can just use a text editor. You don't have to worry about learning these higher level IDEs, these programming environments. And then once you understand how this kind of coding works, then you can go to those environments and learn that more sophisticated software. So those are the warnings for you today. So with that, let's go over to the computer. Let's dive in. Again, this is not a rank beginner class. At this point, you need to understand Linux. You need to understand MySQL. I mean, understand. You don't have to be expert. You have to understand Linux. You have to understand MySQL. You have to understand what Apache is supposed to frickin' do. And then I'll be showing you this PHP stuff today. And again, you should know PHP, at least a basic level of PHP at this point. And so with that, let's go over to the computer and we'll dive in to showing you how to connect PHP to your MySQL database server. So here we are at my MacBook Pro. Again, I'm using a MacBook Pro. On MacBook Pro, I have VirtualBox installed, and within an instance of VirtualBox, I have Ubuntu Desktop 18.04 LTS. Now, this is why I decided to use a graphical user environment for the MySQL series, because now that we're getting to things like PHP and we're actually needing something like a web browser to see what the results are, since I'm using this graphical user environment, that makes life easier for me. So basically what I'm showing you today though, if you're trying to do this in 5 years, if you're trying to use Ubuntu 22.04 LTS, everything that I'm showing you today has stayed the same more or less for a decade. So if you are watching this 5 years from now, there may be a quirk or two, but basically everything that I'm showing you is relatively simple. Now the first thing, so for this environment, again, I have Ubuntu Desktop 18.04, and then I use something called tasksel to create this lab environment. So tasksel allows you to create an Apache or a LAMP server very easily. It installs Apache, MySQL, and PHP. And so one of the first things that I need to do is make sure that Apache is running and that I can connect to it. So I don't simply want to go to the command line and see if the Apache 2 service is started. I actually want to see if it works. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up Mozilla Firefox and I'm going to type in 128 127.0.0.1. So this is called the loopback address. So if you have a web server running on your server, you can use a web browser on that server, type in 127.0.0.1, and that will loop you back. And basically it makes you be able to see whether or not your web server is actually functioning. So I hit enter, and so I can see Apache 2 Ubuntu default page. You know, basically it says it works. So this is important, especially as we go forward, because again, you don't just simply need to know whether the Apache service is running, but you need to know on your box whether you can access the Apache web pages. So this is something where if you're screwing around with your computer, with your lab environment, Apache 2 may be functioning, but if you screwed up something with Firefox, if you screwed up something with file permissions, if you screwed up something, when you went to 127.0.0.1, you may run into issues. So go to 127.0.0.1. You should get a page that more or less looks like this. If it does, you can continue. If not, you're going to need to troubleshoot. Now, past this, if we want to go to files, we are going to need to create a directory called PHP within 127.0.0.1, and that is where we're going to put our PHP scripts. So you click on files, then you go to other locations, and so from there you click on the computer, from there you go to var, from there you go to www, then from there you go to HTML. So this index.html page is what we're receiving here when we go to 127.0.0.1. Now what we're going to need to do is we're going to create a folder, but we don't have permission right now within the GUI environment to create a folder, and so that's why we are going to go to the command line. So we're going to go down here to show applications, then we're going to go up to terminal, type in terminal, and we are going to go into the terminal. So at this point, what we're going to need to do is we are going to need to create a PHP folder so that we can dump these PHP scripts into that PHP folder. So the first thing that we're going to do is we are going to make that PHP directory. So we're going to do sudo, so super user do, basically as the root user, make dir, so we're going to make a directory, /var, /www, /html, right? So again, when I was navigating to get down here, that's all we're doing. So so system root, var, www, html, and then we're going to need to create a directory in here, and we're going to need to call it php. So it's going to be a php directory, and as long as we did it right, it's going to ask for password 1 2 3 4 5 6. Hit enter, and look at that, we now have a PHP directory. But the next thing we need to do in order to be able to actually write into that PHP directory is we're going to need to change the owner to make life easier. So when I use gEdit, so I can simply save into that PHP directory, I'm going to need the right permission in order to do that. So what I'm just going to do to make my life easier, I'm going to change the ownership of that PHP directory to be mine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do sudo change own to Bob of /var /www /html /php. So this will change the ownership of this PHP folder to me, and I am Bob. I'm going to hit enter, and now we can go here and we can do things. We can create new folders, we can save into here, so on and so forth. So that's the first things that we're going to need to do. We're going to need to verify that Apache actually works on this particular system, and then we're going to need to create a folder called PHP at that Apache root within the HTML folder, and then we need to give ourselves right permission for that particular folder. Again, you can change ownership, you could change permissions, you can do it however you want to do it. I simply change the owner because I think that's an easy way to do. So from there, and now what we're going to do is we're going to go to show applications, and then we are going to use gEdit. So we're going to type in gEdit, that will give us the text editor. We hit enter, and now we are into our bland little text editor here. From this point, we're going to need to change a couple of preferences to make our life easier. So go to preferences, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to display line numbers. So you see how that line number showed up over here? So you want to turn on display line numbers, and then down here under highlighting, highlight matching brackets. So when you open a bracket and when you close a bracket, this will simply highlight the matching brackets, and then we're going to hit X. And now, again, since this is a new lab environment, we want to make sure everything is working how it's supposed to do. The first thing that I want to do is just do a little print hello world to make sure everything's working properly. So Apache is working properly, and PHP is working properly, and permissions are working properly, the whole 9 yards. So I'm going to open up a PHP bracket here. So PHP, I'm simply going to do print hello world, close, 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 and close. So at this point, you should know exactly what I did here. So open up PHP script, did the whole print hello world, closed. Let me just see if I can change. Can I change the font here? Let's see here. Text editor, preferences. Okay, fonts and color. So we're just going to increase the size of this just to make it easier for you to see. Let's see, 25. Select. There we go. So that'll make life a little bit easier for you to see. And so again, those are the kinds of things you can do in here. Basic little stuff with a text editor. Okay, so we open up a PHP script. We're saying print hello world. Then we're closing the PHP script. And then we're going to do save. So when we do save, we're going to go over here to other locations. Then we're going to go to computer again. Then we're going to go down to var. Then we're going to go down to www. Then we're going to go to HTML. Then we're going to go to PHP. So once we are all the way here, because this is where we need to dump the file, I just want to do php.php, or we'll just call it PHP test. So php test.php, and then we're going to hit save. And then we're going to go over to our web browser. So we're going to go over to Firefox. And so 127.0.0.1, that is the loop back address. Then we're going to do /, and then we're going to go into the PHP folder. So we created that folder for PHP, right? So www.html. So HTML is the root. Then we created a PHP folder. And so in that PHP folder, then we're again going to then hit the script, php test.php. We're going to hit enter. And then we see hello world, right? So 127.0.0.0.1, that is the loop back address. That will send us to the HTML folder for Apache. So we created a PHP folder within that HTML folder, and within that we put PHP test.php just to verify that PHP is actually working. So this is the first thing that you want to do, again, to verify that your whole environment is doing whatever the hell it's supposed to be doing, because the last thing you want to do is go and start writing more complicated scripts if you haven't verified that things are working properly. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go up to text editor, and then we're going to do new window. So this will allow us to create a new script. And so this is going to be the connection script. So the first thing that we need to do is open up the PHP tags. So this is going to say this is a PHP script. And then we need to give the connection variables. So $servername, $username, and $password. These are the credentials that will be passed to the MySQL server to try to connect. So we do $servername equals double quotation marks, and since this is the local system, it will be a local host, and then you do a semicolon to close that. Then you do $username equals, again, open double quotation marks, and then our user is Bob, so the same user we've been using for all of our demonstration classes before. Again, it's important to understand here, this is for the MySQL server, not for the Linux machine itself. So this is the Bob account on MySQL, not on the Linux. Then we do semicolon, then $password equals, and whatever the password is for Bob, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Close double quotation marks and do semicolon. Again, remember in the PHP world, if you've forgotten, lines, basically commands, end with the semicolon, and variables always have to start with the $. If you do a variable without a $, well, that won't work. Then from that, we're going to go down, and then we're going to create the variable for the connection, right? So we're going to use an if statement to try to connect to the MySQL database. But with that if statement, we're going to use the connection variable, and that's going to have all the information required in order to try to connect to the MySQL server. So we're going to do $conn, so this is just for connection, equals. And now with this, we're going to use that MySQLi extension. So we're going to say new MySQLi. So this is calling a new MySQLi function. And then we're going to plug in server name, comma, username, comma, password, close parentheses, and then do semicolon. So new MySQLi, server name, username, and password. So theoretically, you don't actually have to create the variables up here. You could simply pass this information directly here, but you know, good writing etiquette, good syntax. You create the variables up here and then pass them down here. So this is going to be for connection. Now past that, we're then going to go down and we're then going to go into the if statement. And so basically what we're going to do here is we're going to try to connect. We're going to try to connect. If it doesn't work, if it errors, we want to print out connection failed with what the error is. If it's successful, then we'll simply print out that it was successful. So what we're going to say here is we're going to say if open parentheses, and so we're going to do conn. So basically we are calling this variable here, this connection variable here. So this can be called anything. So again, you can have multiple connections. So you could call this conn1, conn3, you can call it Billy Bob if you want, as long as it has a $sign in the beginning. So this part here, this part is just whatever variable name you want to give it, however you want to reference it. This part here, that's actually what has to remain the same. So anyway, so if the connections, we're going to try to connect. And then we use this little hyphen arrow thing here. And then we say connect underscore error. So basically what this is saying is if the connection is an error. So not if the connection is a success. We're saying if the connection is an error, then do something. So we're going to open a bracket. We're going to go down. We're going to do a tab here. So if there's a connection error, we're going to die. We're going to just kill the connection. We're going to kill the connection because there is no connection. And with that, we're going to print out connection failed. So we're just going to simply do double quotation marks, connection failed. They put a space in there, close double quotation marks, and then we're going to do something called concatenate. So concatenate is where you connect basically two things together in order to print them all out. And so what we want to do is we want to print out what the error is. So not only do we want the connection to know that the connection failed, we want to know what the error is. So we're going to do a period, and then we're going to do $conn. So again, we're referencing this variable again. And then we're just going to ask basically for the connection error. And so it's going to do connect underscore error. Then we're going to close parentheses, then we're going to do the semicolon, and then we're going to go down, and then we're going to close the bracket, right? So this is the if statement itself. It's going to try to connect. If the connection failed, it's going to print out the words connection failed, dot concatenated with what the actual error is. If not, if it goes through and everything is fine, then we're going to simply echo connection successful. Close parentheses, semicolon. So with the echo, you can just print out your string this way. You don't need the parentheses. If you had the print, you would need parentheses here. We'll just be using echo because that's the standard way to do it. And so basically that's it. So if everything goes well, if the MySQL server is running, if the server name is proper, if the username is proper, if the password is proper, if everything is coded properly, then you'll simply see connection is successful. If there is a failure, you'll get the connection failed, dot whatever the error is. Then we got to go down, and then we simply close out the PHP code. And that's all we need for this particular connection. And so again, all we're doing here is actually just simply connecting to the MySQL server. From that, we're going to click Save. We're going to go to Other Locations. We're going to go to Computer. We're going to go to var. We're going to go to www. We're going to go to HTML, and then we're going to go to PHP. So it has to be all the way down there. And then we're just simply going to call this, let's say, connect connect test.php. Make sure to fat finger that, and then we will hit save. From there, we go to Firefox, and then we can go up here and type in, so again, loopback address 127.0.0.1, and then we have a folder there, PHP, then / connect test.php. So if everything goes properly, we should see success. Cross your fingers. Enter. Yay! I always worry about this. I'm a horrible coder. You know how I talk? How I talk about like being a bricklayer, and you can know something, but it's doing it 1,000 times. Oh, I fat finger so many things. So anyways, I'm always, again, with these classes, I'm always nervous. I fat fingered something. But we got a success here. So the connection was successful. So PHP was able to connect to our MySQL database server on this particular system. Now to show you what an error would look like, if we go here, and so this is the password we're using. Let's just simply put, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 instead of 6. We hit save. We go back to Firefox. We do a refresh. And so we can see connection failed, access denied for user Bob at localhost. We go back, we change it back to 6. I hit save. Oh, I do a refresh, and then it's successful again. We go up here to Bob. Let's just do Bob 1. We hit save. We go back to Firefox. We see what the error is. Access denied for Bob 1. Okay, so we go back. We put it back to Bob. We hit save. And then we see what the error is. Nope, everything is successful now. Then we go up, let's say localhost. We just put 1 at the end of localhost to mess that up. We hit save. We go to Firefox. We do a refresh. And then again, so connection failed, PHP network get address, blah, 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 blah. That failed. Name or service not known. So we can go back, get rid of the 1, hit save, do a refresh. Oops, do a refresh. And now the connection is successful again. So this is an important thing too. When in the technology world, as a technology professional, it's as important to understand what problems look like as what success looks like. It's probably more important to know what problems look like versus success. If everything is working properly, your users aren't going to call you. It's when things are wrong, right? And so it's good to go in here, and this is where I say, type everything out on your own, have errors, have problems, and see what the errors are, and then learn to troubleshoot those errors, because that's the kind of thing you'll see in the future. So anyways, that's the basic code right here. This is the basic code for how you connect to a MySQL database server using PHP. Again, we're using this MySQLi extension. It is built into PHP, so you do not have to add anything additional. You don't have to do any modifications. Everything here is just kind of like the standard way to do it. This whole connection thing, again, you can name this connection variable, whatever you want to name this connection variable, especially if you're going to be connecting to multiple databases. So again, you could have connection 1, connection 2, connection 3. If you're spitting out reports for multiple, possibly database servers, you could do that. But everything past that has to stay the same. So you do new, MySQLi, pass the server name, pass the username, pass the password, and then you come down here to the if, so you're going to try to do the connection. Basically what this is saying is if the connection is an error, then you kill the connection and print out connection failed and what the error is. If not, then it's going to go through and says connection is successful. So that is the basic code and what we're doing here. So this is what you're going to need to play with and start to get comfortable with before we go into the more complicated things. So yay! Now you know how to use PHP to connect to your MySQL database server. Yippee! And now past this, then we can start going in there and doing select statements and inserts and updates, and you can actually start building something that a modern end user would want to deal with. But again, for the new people out there, I really want you to start understanding how all of these different types of technologies come together to end up creating a finished product. So many new people come to me and they say, Eli, what language do I need to learn? Or what technology do I need to learn? And it's so frustrating because what I try to explain to people is that you have all of these different technologies that come together to create the finished product. You have the Linux operating system, so you have to understand the operating system, whether it's Linux or Windows or Mac. That's its own thing. Then you have to understand MySQL. You have to understand the database server. Then you have to understand PHP, right? So PHP is now going to be connecting to that database server. But then on top of that, you need the input and output for PHP. All PHP is doing, PHP is providing the logic for how data gets put into the database and how data gets pulled out of the database. But then you need some kind of front end or some kind of input-output system to actually put data in and pull data out, right? To actually provide something to PHP. So you may use something like HTML. So you can use HTML, like an HTML form. The HTML form will collect the data. Then you hit submit, and what happens is that HTML form then passes that data to the PHP script that then inputs that into the database. When you do a report, you hit the button or whatever, basically what happens is PHP grabs the data from the MySQL database, formats that data using HTML, and then pops that out to your web browser. And so again, like if you're looking at reports, you may need to know HTML, you may need to know CSS. If it's a dynamic report or something, you may also need to know JavaScript. Like all of these technologies come together. One of the classes that I will do in the future is where I'm going to be using Arduino to be able to communicate with your MySQL database. So an Arduino will actually communicate with a PHP script. That PHP script will then take the data that the Arduino is offering, dump that into the MySQL database. Then what will happen is PHP will be used in order to actually create commands that the Arduino devices will be able to read, and then they will then perform actions based off of whatever the server is telling those little devices to do. And so this is why it's very important to understand in the technology world, we have multiple different pieces of technology that are all coming together in order to create whatever solution that we're trying to provide. And this is before we get into the networking component, right? Because with the networking component, then you're talking about things like firewalls, and then you're talking about things like ports, right? Are the proper ports open, and that type of thing, right? So even what I'm showing you right now uses multiple different types of technology, and this is just ridiculously simple. This is still a lab environment. This is still such just a nasty little lab environment, right? So just some of those things to be thinking about in the real world of technology. So as always, I enjoyed doing this video and look forward to seeing you at the next one. Apparently, the type of content you just saw is not what Susan W. wants for the future of YouTube. This means that recommendations by YouTube to this channel have dropped massively and views are becoming comically small. I hate to ask. I used to say I would never ask, but if you could subscribe, like, comment, and most importantly, share the videos that you appreciate, that may help slow the death of this channel. Do remember that if anything at all happens to this channel, you can go to elithecomputerguy.com to view the content and access information not available on YouTube.